I've fought in wars and buried the love of my life. But nothing stings like being forgotten by the people you raised. The wreath on Marissa's front door was oversized, glittering, perfect. Red bow, gold bells, every branch curled like it was ordered off a catalog. I held the wrapped box tight under my arm, just a small something for Emma, a necklace that belonged to her grandmother. I figured tonight was the right time. I knocked once, didn't want to press the bell. The sound of my own knock felt more honest. Rick opened the door. His smile didn't touch his eyes. It never did. "Oh," he said, "you made it." I nodded. "It's Christmas, isn't it?" He stepped aside. "Yeah, come on in." Inside, laughter spilled from the dining room. Coats piled neatly on the guest chair. Smell of glazed ham, rosemary, cinnamon. I followed the noise. And that's when I saw it. The table stretched long across the room, plates perfectly set, candles lit, wine already poured. But no chair for me. Not one. "Hey," Marissa said, breezing in from the kitchen, cheeks flushed. "You didn't say you were coming." "You invited me, weeks ago." She blinked. "Right, well, it's just we already did the head count. We're full up." "Full up?" I asked. She gestured to the table. 12 seats, 12 guests. What was I supposed to do, kick someone out? My mouth stayed closed. I looked again at the table, 2 neighbors, a coworker from her firm, even Rick's old college roommate. People I'd never met, smiling and clinking glasses like they belonged more than I ever did. Rick chimed in, pouring wine. "We didn't expect you to actually come, sir. Figured it might be too cold for the drive." "I live 20 minutes away." "Right," he said, as if that proved something. Marissa leaned in, fake concern dripping from her voice. "Maybe next year, Dad. We just didn't plan on extra." Extra. That word lodged somewhere behind my ribs. I handed her the gift. She hesitated. "It's for Emma," I said. "Oh," she said, then forced a smile. "That's sweet of you." She didn't open it, didn't even set it by the tree, just placed it on the counter like a package that hadn't been ordered. I looked past her. Emma was sitting on the couch, legs tucked under her, watching a movie with another kid. She didn't see me. Didn't know I'd been uninvited with a smile. "I should go," I said. Marissa touched my arm, more reflex than affection. "Dad, don't be like this." I looked down at her hand, then back up at her. "Like what?" She didn't answer. I stepped out into the cold, the door shutting behind me with a whisper. "If someone's listening out there, don't let them make you feel like you showed up to the wrong story. Sometimes they just rewrote the ending without telling you." The snow had started falling harder. Streetlights blurred into halos. I stood on the sidewalk longer than I should have, just listening to the muffled sounds of joy inside a house I helped build, one mortgage payment at a time. I remembered when Marissa was 10, and I drove through a blizzard just to get her the dollhouse she circled in a catalog, back when I mattered more than presentation. I got in the truck, hands stiff from the cold. The dashboard light glowed amber. No one called. No one came running. Not even Emma. The gift sat on the passenger seat now, looking smaller than before. I pulled away slow, the tires crunching over snow like old bones. They say blood is thicker than water. But sometimes it's also colder. I didn't lose my seat at the table. I just realized it was never saved for me in the first place. And that was the moment something shifted. Not loud, not angry. Just still. Still enough to hear the crack where a legacy begins to break. Loneliness isn't loud. It hums quiet, constant, like an empty fridge at midnight. The soup hissed in the microwave. Some off-brand chicken noodle I bought months ago when I thought I'd be too tired to cook. The kitchen light flickered overhead, like even the bulbs were unsure if they belonged here. I poured the soup into a chipped bowl and sat down by the window. Across the street, A family's Christmas lights blinked in rhythm, red, green, blue. A kid darted past the curtain. Laughter followed. Not mine. I sipped the broth, salty, metallic, like it resented being called food. My coat still hung on the chair, the gift inside the pocket, still wrapped, still unopened. I hadn't even bothered to remove the tag. I picked up my phone, opened the call log. There it was, Marissa voicemail sent. I hit play. Hey, it's Dad, just wanted to say, I was looking forward to tonight. I brought something for Emma. I guess I'll see you next year. I hit delete, watched the message vanish like I never spoke it at all. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling, cracks along the edges like veins on an aging hand. I thought of Marissa as a toddler, dragging her blanket down the hallway, yelling for pancakes. I used to know how to make her laugh. Somewhere along the way, I forgot the recipe. I stood and opened the hallway closet, pulled down the old brown box labeled in faded Sharpie, M letters, 1983-1997. I hadn't opened it in years. I sat back down, unfolded the top. Dozens of envelopes, careful cursive, my wife's hand. I picked one at random. The postmark said 1989. She was pregnant with Marissa. Don't let them forget who you are, even if they try. You've always carried more weight than you showed, more grief than you let loose. When they forget, remind them. Gently but firmly. My throat clenched. That woman knew how to write a wound. Another letter said, when you feel small, remember, you built this family with your hands. No one erases a builder. I folded the letter slowly, stared at the postmark. Back when the world still made sense, before it turned slick with cold smiles and empty invitations. Sometimes your name fades from their lips, long before it fades from their memory. But it's still betrayal, just slower. I left the box open, couldn't put it back tonight. The heat clicked on, loud and sudden. The pipes groaned like they didn't want to work either. I closed the fridge, empty except for a carton of eggs, half a bottle of mustard, and a single slice of American cheese that had turned the wrong color. I wasn't hungry anymore anyway. The digital clock blinked, 12:01 a.m., a new day, same silence. I shuffled to the chair by the window and sat. Same chair I slept in most nights since my back gave up on the bed. Outside, snow dusted the pavement like powdered sugar over old wounds. This is what exile looks like. Not a sentence. Not a confrontation. Just no reply, no seat, no plate. Only silence wrapped in tinsel. The coat was still on the chair, the gift inside. I reached in and pulled it out. The wrapping was creased now, slightly damp from the night's drive. The little gold ribbon had bent. It was a necklace, nothing extravagant, just a silver locket. Inside was a photo of her mother holding baby Emma. A family Emma would never know truthfully. Not while Marissa controlled the narrative. Not while I sat here in the dark, waiting for calls that wouldn't come. I pressed the locket to my palm, closed my hand. There was a time I believed you could earn your place in someone's life. Be a good man, work hard, sacrifice, forgive more than you should. I believed family was a bond, not a battlefield. But maybe, just maybe, some bonds aren't broken. They're snipped quietly, with holiday scissors and polite dismissal. They didn't need to scream to cut me out. They just didn't count me in. And that's when I knew. It was time to stop hopping for space at their table and start building my own. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a caption, curated, filtered, and sharp as a blade. The sky outside was still blue-gray when I sat up in my chair. My neck ached. My hip protested. But what hurt more was the heaviness in my chest that hadn't left since I stood in Marissa's hallway, coat still on, holding a wrapped gift like a fool waiting for a welcome. I shuffled over to the desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. The invitation sat exactly where I'd left it back in October, right next to Emma's crayon drawings and a few old birthday cards from years when they still remembered. I unfolded it slowly. Christmas Eve dinner, a night of family, food, and tradition. Join us as we end the year in love and togetherness. There was even a fake pine border printed around the edge. Cute. I ran my fingers over the printed date. December 24th, 6:30 p.m. She had made sure I got it. She wanted me to believe I was included, just not enough to actually follow through. I sat down, opened my laptop, and typed her name into the social bar. Her profile popped up. The first post was from just last night. A wide shot of the table decorated perfectly. The big ham, cranberry sauce, those little rosemary sprigs she used to mock me for loving. 12 people sat around it. Some I recognized. Rick's family, a few neighbors. Others were strangers. Not one chair was empty. I zoomed in. My chair, the one they said was still being brought out when I first arrived, wasn't in the photo at all. And then came the caption. No better way to end the year, surrounded by the people who matter most. That line landed hard. No dramatics, just a clean, decisive stab. The kind that doesn't bleed immediately, but hits something deep. I right-clicked the image, saved it. Opened my email, typed in Harold's address. Subject, time to get to work. Body attached photo. I was replaced, not ignored, replaced. I attached the image, took a long breath and hit send. 5 minutes later, my inbox dinged. Harold's reply, let's make room. They used to call me the rock of this family. Now they decorate their lives like I never existed. But I've buried men who thought they could outplan me. My own daughter won't be the first to learn that lesson. The photo sat open on my desktop. I stared at it longer than I should have. There was Emma, blurry in the corner, her eyes half-closed mid-laugh. I wondered what they told her, if she asked about me, if she noticed I never came inside. Or worse, if she hadn't noticed at all. I opened another drawer and pulled out the little notebook I used for personal notes, stuff I never said aloud. On a blank page I wrote, let's make room. Step 1, remove them from mine. The coffee pot sputtered behind me. I poured a cup black, no sugar, no cream. Too much sweetness lately, and none of it honest. I picked up my phone again, scrolled through more of her posts. Thanksgiving, no invite. Rick's birthday, nothing. Even Emma's recital last month, I wasn't told. And yet each caption carried words like family, gratitude, legacy. It was performance, all of it. Legacy isn't built on captions. It's carried in hands that held you when no one watched. She forgot who built the table she now guards like a gatekeeper. I walked over to the closet, pulled out the wrapped gift from last night, sat down with it. My fingers brushed the ribbon. I didn't unwrap it. Instead, I placed it on the mantel, let it sit there, a symbol. Not of what I gave, but of what they'll never get again. I looked back at the screen. Harold was already typing again. Another message blinked into view. Let's draft the new trust this week. You sure about this? I stared at the blinking cursor, then typed one word. Absolutely. Then I hit send. They cleared a seat at the table for strangers. Now I'll clear their names from everything that mattered. They thought old papers meant old power, but some things age into steel, not dust. The storage unit groaned when I lifted the latch, the cold metal squealing like it hadn't seen daylight in years. The hallway light flickered behind me, throwing long shadows across stacks of old boxes and forgotten years. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. The air smelled like cardboard, dried ink, and time. My knees creaked as I knelt and started digging. Manila folders, tax returns from decades past, letters from my wife, God rest her soul. Each file held a piece of the man I used to be. Near the back, under a crate marked Estate 2006, I found it. A black binder, thick with plastic sleeves, yellowed at the corners. I opened it slowly, and there it was, on the fourth page, sealed and stamped in fatting ink. My will. Handwritten, witnessed, notarized. Dated. Legally sound. I had forgotten how simple I kept it back then. The lines were clean. My late wife's handwriting in the margins, where we had scribbled in changes after Sunday breakfasts. She always said, if something happens to both of us, we want our values to outlive us. I ran my finger along the line that held Marissa's name. Secondary. A fallback, not a foundation. The bulk of it. Two causes. A veteran scholarship fund I helped set up after retiring. A hospice charity my wife used to volunteer for before cancer took her. Marissa wanted to modernize the paperwork years ago. I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. Dad, she'd said, sitting on my porch with a glass of wine, let me help you get all this digital. I mean, what if something happens and no one can read your chicken scratch? I chuckled back then. I trust my pen more than I trust any cloud. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. There was something behind them even then. Now I know what it was. Control. I pulled out my phone, careful not to smudge the document. I took a photo, then another, then a close-up of the notarization stamp. I texted them to Harold with a single line. Found it, it holds. My phone buzzed back in less than a minute. Start the countdown. I sat back on the cold concrete floor, binder in my lap. She thought I was old and slow. But I built my life on foresight. Not fire. I stayed there for a while. Let the silence stretch. This wasn't revenge. It was reality. A version of me that planned for betrayal before love made me naive. A version my wife trusted. And a version I was ready to become again. I flipped to the last page of the binder. There was a photo tucked inside. Me and her standing on the porch, arms around each other. She was holding a donation receipt. I was holding Emma as a baby. God, time is cruel. But memory is a weapon too. As I packed the binder carefully into my bag, I spotted a sticky note folded inside the back cover. My wife's handwriting again. If Marissa ever forgets where she came from, remind her who paid the rent. It hit me hard. Like she'd known all along how this would unfold. I closed the binder, stood slowly, and made my way back to the door. The sunlight hit me as I stepped outside. Blinding cold but honest. No filters, no captions. Let them keep their dinner tables. I kept the documents. And soon the truth. Sometimes the loudest revenge is the kind that waits in silence, wrapped in ribbon and regret. It was early. The frost still clung to the mailbox and the grass sparkled like it had something to celebrate. I parked half a block away, not wanting to draw eyes or questions. The box sat on the passenger seat beside me, wrapped in deep red paper, gold ribbon tied with care. Same one I'd carried 2 nights ago, untouched. But inside now, a printed copy of my original will, the real one, the one she never thought I'd remember, never thought I'd still have. Taped on top, a single handwritten note. In case you ever wonder what could have been. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. She'd know the handwriting. And she'd feel the weight. I walked up to her porch and set the box down carefully, right where the morning light would catch it, right where her doorbell camera could see me. I didn't ring, didn't knock. Just turned and walked back to the truck. She wanted to stage the perfect Christmas for the world. Let her. Even if the wrapping hides a funeral. An hour later, I was back in my apartment, kettle whistling. My phone buzzed. Harold. I picked up, "It's done. You sure she'll take the bait?" I stared out the window. She already has. By noon, I was right. Marissa's social media feed lit up. A photo of the wrapped box on her entry table. Captioned, "Dad dropped by after all red love when things come full circle." 300 likes in an hour. Comments flooded in. "So sweet. Glad you're all together. Family is everything." I took a screenshot. Texted it to Harold, posing with her own undoing. He replied with a single emoji, performing arts. I scrolled through the comments again, letting the irony soak in. She had no idea what sat inside that box. She saw the wrapping, not the reckoning. Maybe she wouldn't open it for days, maybe weeks. But one day, curiosity would crack her pride. And then she'd see it. The will that erased her. The future she threw away, hand-delivered by the very man she excluded. You can stage a lie for the world, but the truth always sits beneath the bow. That evening, I took the original document, the real will, and placed it back in the fireproof lockbox under my bed. I ran my hand across the lid, firm and final. Marissa could pretend online, but paperwork didn't care for pretending. Later that night, Emma called. Her little voice on the phone melted something in me. "Grandpa, Mommy said you left us a present." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I did, sweetheart. Can I open it?" I paused. "Maybe when you're older." She giggled, "Okay." I hung up and sat in silence, letting the weight of that laugh echo in the room. I gave her a gift she'd never thank me for, and a legacy she'd never claim. But Emma might one day understand. The kettle whistled again. I poured the tea slowly, and smiled for the first time since Christmas Eve. Let the world believe in happy endings. Mine was just getting started. Sometimes the smallest voice holds the loudest truth, and sometimes that voice is the only one worth hearing. My phone buzzed just past 9. I was halfway through a lukewarm bowl of rice and canned beans. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Hi, Grandpa." I froze. "Emma." Her voice was softer than I remembered. She was 14 now, almost a woman in the world, still a child in her heart. "Yeah, I used Mom's phone. She's in the shower." I set my bowl down slowly. "You okay?" She hesitated. "I just wanted to talk to you, alone." I leaned back in the chair, heart tightening. "All right, I'm listening." She took a breath. "Mom said you made Christmas awkward, that you're being, difficult now." I didn't speak. The silence hung heavy. Then her voice dropped to a whisper, "But I don't believe her." My throat ached. I swallowed hard. "Why not?" "Because I know how they are," she said, simple and clean. "They tell me not to ask questions, to be polite, but I hear stuff." I smiled, pain tucked behind my teeth. "You always were too smart for your own good." She giggled just a little. "That's what Grandma used to say." We talked for 20 minutes. About her science fair project. About her dog chewing up the couch. About the drawing she made of her grandmother, with angel wings, she said. She didn't ask about the will, about the photo, about the silence between me and her parents. She didn't need to. Emma wasn't calling for answers. She was reaching for warmth. "Can I come see you sometime?" she asked suddenly. "You know where I live," I said. "But Mom said." "She doesn't get to decide that." Silence. Then, "Okay." We hung up. I sat there, holding the phone like it was made of glass. That call, it wasn't long, but it cracked open something inside me that had been sealed tight for months. When your own blood turns on you, you learn to live in silence. But one small voice can drag you back to the surface. I pulled out the desk drawer, reached for the box with old stationery, yellowed edges, smell of dust and ink. I used to write letters to her grandmother on the same paper when I was deployed overseas. Now I wrote one more. Emma, if you're reading this, it means truth found you. I loved your mother once, more than she'll ever understand, but power and pride change people. They made me a stranger in my own story. I've left you pieces of the truth, documents, photos, letters, not for revenge, but for clarity. You deserve to know where you come from. Your grandmother would be proud of the way you see the world. Keep that sight sharp. Love, Grandpa. I folded it carefully, slid it into an envelope. On the front, I wrote in small letters, "For Emma when she's ready." I stood and walked over to the shelf, lifted the silver-framed photo of her grandmother smiling on our old porch swing. Behind the photo, tucked into the wood backing, I slipped the letter in. No one would know it was there, except me. And one day, Emma, legacy isn't what you leave in your will. It's what you leave behind in someone's heart. And tonight, mine found a heartbeat again. I sat back down, tea in hand, and whispered into the quiet. I'm still here, kid, still fighting for you. You don't burn down a house built in betrayal. You tear it apart beam by beam and rebuild with your own hands. The knock was soft but deliberate. I opened the door to find Harold, briefcase in one hand, thermos in the other, wearing that same trench coat he'd had since the 90s. He gave a nod, didn't wait to be invited in. We weren't in the habit of wasting words. He laid the thermos on the table and opened the briefcase like a surgeon prepping for surgery. 3 folders. One green, one black, one burgundy. This, he said, tapping the green one, is your original will, photocopied, digitized, and legally verified. No one touches it. I nodded. He tapped the black folder next. This is the new trust. It mirrors the old will in spirit, but closes every loophole, every hypothetical. No ambiguity. And the red one, I asked. He looked up. The transfer of asset form. We're moving titles, your pension account, the house, even the paintings from your military tour, all into the trust. My eyes landed on the signature's lines. They were blank. Waiting. I wasn't erasing them. I was just refusing to let them erase me. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Not this time. Harold watched quietly, a slight nod as each page flipped and each signature took its place. When I reached the trust document, I paused. The line titled Primary Beneficiary read, Emma Grace Whitmore, granddaughter. Secondary was the Veterans Hospice Fund. Tertiary, left blank. Harold had left it for me. I tapped the space, let it stay empty. He raised an eyebrow. No backup plans, he asked. No ghosts. He gave a small smile, fair. As he prepared the notary stamps, Harold spoke low, firm. You know this isn't revenge. I know. This is architecture. I looked at him. He met my eyes. We're rebuilding your legacy from the ground up. No noise, no courtroom drama, just facts, documents, and a foundation that doesn't bend to guilt or charm. I nodded, and no room for redecorating. Exactly, he said. No one paints over this blueprint without your hand. He stamped the final page. The sound echoed like a gavel in the quiet room. There's something holy about paperwork done right. No shouting, no spectacle. Just a quiet, legal shift of power. Harold packed the folders carefully back into his case. I'll file these tomorrow, he said. Keep your copies safe. I've got a spot, I said, nodding toward the old chest in the corner. The one that held my service medals, my wife's wedding ring, and now the only papers that still mattered. He stood, glanced at the photograph of Emma and her grandmother on the mantel. You sure about this? As sure as I've ever been about anything. He gave a nod. then reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. "What's that?" "Your copy of the Emma letter," he said. "I made one just in case." I smiled, always 2 steps ahead. "You taught me that." We didn't hug. Didn't need to. He walked out as quietly as he'd come. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and stood in the dark, staring at the shadow of the chest where my legacy now sat. Tidy, final, immune to manipulation. They had the decorations. I had the deed. And now I had the design. Some truths don't need to be shouted. Sometimes the quietest gestures echo the loudest. The folding chair creaked beneath me as I sat near the back of the community center hall. The place smelled like old coffee and fresh paint. Banners in red, white, and blue draped the windows. Volunteers wore smiles like uniforms. No one knew who I was, not officially. The program listed "Anonymous Donor" beneath the gold lettering for the Margaret Daniels Legacy Scholarship Fund. They didn't have to know. The mayor stepped up to the podium, notes in hand, trying to look casual but clearly rehearsed. "Tonight," she began, "we gather not just to celebrate these bright young students, but to thank someone whose generosity will carry forward the legacy of a remarkable woman." A pause. Margaret Daniels was a schoolteacher, a veteran's wife, and a tireless believer in second chances. Thanks to this new endowment, we will now support tuition for the children of local veterans, every year moving forward. I didn't blink, just stared ahead at the slideshow that began to flicker behind her. Photos of my wife filled the screen, her smile wide, her arms always mid-gesture, teaching, laughing, living. One was from our wedding day, another from a school field trip. The last was her sitting on our old porch, Emma in her lap, blowing bubbles into the summer air. The room clapped gently. A few heads turned. Someone in the front row whispered something and pointed toward me. I stayed seated. Recognition never fed me, legacy does. A boy no older than 16 walked up next. His name was Caleb. His father died overseas the year he was born. His mother sat 3 rows ahead of me, dabbing her eyes. Caleb spoke clearly. "I don't know who you are, but thank you. I'm going to be the first in my family to go to college, and I'm going to study law so I can help people the way someone helped us." The crowd clapped again, louder this time. I looked down at my hands, folded tight in my lap. They weren't trembling. They were steady. After the speeches, punch and cookies were served. People mingled. A woman with gray curls and a bright red scarf walked over to me. "You're him, aren't you?" I smiled faintly. "I'm just here for the cookies." She nodded slowly as if that answered everything. "Well, if you are him, thank you. Margaret must have been one hell of a woman." "She was," I said. "She still is." The woman patted my shoulder, then turned away. I sat there long after the room began to clear. Volunteers folded chairs. Someone vacuumed near the stage. I watched the final slideshow frame fade to black, her name etched in gold. They think it's a donation. But it's more than that. It's a message, a ledger balanced in silence. I stood slowly, joints stiff, but heart lighter than it had been in years. Not because I took something from Marissa, but because I gave something back to the world in my wife's name. Unfiltered, unstolen, undiluted by expectation. At the door, the mayor passed by me, offering a polite nod, still unaware. "Hope you enjoyed the program, sir." I nodded. It was perfect. She smiled and walked on. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I felt written in, quietly, indelibly, and forever. 9. The dinner invitation, 650-750 words, Marissa calls, voice sugar-coated. "Thought maybe you'd come for dinner this weekend, make up for the mix-up." I say I'll think about it. Harold laughs when I tell him. "She smelled the money, hasn't she?" I nod. Let her set the table, we'll bring dessert. He prepares the final revisions. This time I bring a guest, my notary. Updated saved memory. 9. The dinner invitation. Word count, 747. When a locked door opens again, it's not always for forgiveness. Sometimes it's to see what you still have in your pockets. The phone rang just after noon. I let it go once, twice. By the third time, I picked up. "Hi, Dad." Marissa's voice came through sweet, smooth, like syrup poured too thick. "Marissa," I said. She giggled. "Thought maybe you'd come for dinner this weekend. Rick's grilling. Emma's been asking about you." I sat in silence, letting the pitch ring in my ears. "To make up for the mix-up at Christmas," she added. "Mix-up," I repeated. She kept going. "You know how chaotic holidays get. Things fall through the cracks. No hard feelings, right?" I glanced at the calendar on the table. Harold's pen had already circled Sunday in red. "I'll think about it," I said flatly. There was a pause, then her voice dropped an octave softer. "We'd really like to see you." I hung up without saying goodbye. Guilt is easy to fake, but greed always leaves a scent. I called Harold. "She finally rang the bell," I told him. He didn't ask who. He just laughed. "She smelled the money, hasn't she? Like it's fresh-baked bread." "I'll prepare the revisions," he said. "Bring the final trust documents and the notary. If she wants a performance, we'll give her one. And dessert." Harold chuckled again. "Pecan pie." Sunday came faster than I expected. I wore my pressed shirt, clean slacks, the same coat I wore to the scholarship dinner. This time the guest list was different, but the game was the same. Harold pulled up beside me in his old Buick, notary in the backseat. A young woman named Tessa, sharp-eyed and quiet. "She know what she's walking into?" I asked. "She notarized 3 divorce settlements last week," Harold said. "She'll be fine." The door opened before we even knocked. Marissa smiled wide, arms outstretched. "Dad." I stepped back half a step. "This is Harold and this is Tessa." She blinked. "Oh, come in." Rick was at the grill flipping steaks with exaggerated confidence. Emma peeked from the hallway, gave a small wave. I smiled back only for her. The table was set this time. Every seat counted. Over dinner, Marissa kept the wine flowing. She laughed too hard at Rick's jokes. She asked about my health like it was a polite formality. I gave short answers. Let the silence hang. Finally, she leaned in. "So I saw the article about Mom's scholarship. That was beautiful." "She'd have liked it," I said. Marissa nodded, then tilted her head. "It must have been expensive." I met her gaze. "Some things are worth it." She tapped her glass with a fingernail. "You know, if you ever wanted to set something aside for Emma or us, we could talk." Harold placed his fork down. "Well," he said cheerfully, "funny you should mention that." He opened the leather folio and slid the final trust revisions across the table. Tessa clicked her pen. The sound cut through the air like a blade. "What's this?" Rick asked. Harold didn't flinch. "Final signature. Mr. Daniels has appointed new successors and amended asset protections. Just needs the final seal." Marissa's smile froze. "You brought legal paperwork to dinner," she said, voice tightening. I finally spoke. "You invited me. You don't flip the table when you're not served. You bring your own. You sign on top of theirs." Harold pushed the document toward me. I signed. Tessa stamped. Silence followed. Marissa stared at the paper like it had insulted her mother. Rick cleared his throat. "So that's it?" "No," I said, "that's dessert." I looked at Emma, still watching from the hallway. She didn't smile. She didn't look away. She just nodded once, like she already understood. Some meals feed your belly. Others feed your legacy. And some Starve the lies that once sat at your table. Sometimes the quietest moments are the ones that scream the loudest. The roast was overcooked and the wine was too sweet, but Marissa had set the table like it was a magazine cover: linen napkins, gold-plated chargers, candles that matched the centerpiece. She wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a soft pink dress, pearl earrings, stage lighting in every room. Rick held court like he owned the place. "You know, Dad, this year's been wild. Closed 3 deals in Q4 alone." He tapped his Rolex against the wine glass, laughing too loudly. I nodded, letting him perform. Marissa passed me the breadbasket like she was handing a trophy to a stranger. "We're just glad you made it this time," she said with that glossy grin, the kind you practice in mirrors, not memories. I chewed quietly. Every bite tasted like cardboard. "I told Rick we should have invited you sooner," she added, eyes flicking to his. "It was just a lot, you know, the holidays." "The holidays," I repeated softly, more to myself than to her. I looked around the table. No photos of her mother. No sign I'd ever lived in the corners of her childhood. Just glass, chrome, and artificial warmth. Rick leaned in. "You've been keeping busy though, right? Harold says you've been making adjustments." Harold, that snake slipped into the conversation like oil on water. I dabbed my mouth with the cloth napkin. "I brought something." Marissa paused mid-sip. "Oh." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope, sealed, heavy. I set it in the middle of the table like a chess piece. Rick chuckled nervously. "Should we open it?" "If you'd like," I said. "Might answer a few questions before you ask them." Marissa opened it. Her hand shook slightly. She scanned the papers. Her posture stiffened. The smile collapsed in stages. This says we're removed," she whispered, throat tightening. Rick reached over, snatched the document. "Removed from what?" "The trust, the estate, everything," Marissa breathed, eyes darting across the lines. "Is this real?" I sipped my water. It tasted colder now. "Signed, sealed, notarized months ago." "But why?" Rick snapped, his voice rising. I didn't flinch. "Because you left me standing on a porch with a gift in my pocket and no seat at your table." "That was a misunderstanding," Marissa began. I cut her off with a look. "No, it was a message. You told me who mattered." I listened. Rick tossed the paper onto the table like it burned his fingers. "You don't get to pull stunts like this. Family talks things through." I laughed once short, bitter. "Family invites you in. Family doesn't erase you from photos, from holidays, from their lives." Marissa pushed back her chair, stood slowly. Her legs wobbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're punishing us." "No," I said calmly. "I'm remembering who I am." Her eyes welled up. Whether from anger or shame, I didn't care. She looked at Rick for support. He just sat there, stone-faced, calculating. I looked past them both, to the empty wall where her mother's picture should have been. That was the only silence that hurt. If someone's listening, I thought, don't let silence swallow your story. I wish someone had told me that when I still believed love was unconditional. Marissa finally spoke. "So that's it." I nodded. "Seats at the table are earned, not inherited." She said nothing, just stood there, pink dress, perfect lighting, eyes full of loss. I stood too, slower, with my cane. The chair creaked beneath me. I placed my napkin on the plate and turned toward the door. Behind me, the envelope still sat in the center of the table. When the truth is finally served, some people lose their appetite. They never notice the fire alarm until the smoke starts pouring under the door. My phone buzzed at 6:42 a.m. One missed call, then another, then a voicemail. I stared at the screen like it owed me peace. Voicemail 1 new. I tapped play. Rick's voice came through like gravel dragged across glass. "You pulled the joint investment. You moved the deeds. Are you out of your damn mind? This is fraud. This is theft. You can't just..." I pressed delete. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and my silence. Harold called an hour later, just as the sun slipped through the blinds. "It's done," he said, voice crisp. "The LLC filed, the property deed has transferred, the last account's out of their reach." "Are the protections in place?" I asked. "Triple-checked. Your assets are now under the Daniels Foundation. Irrevocable. Their names won't show up even in the footnotes." I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Good." "You sure you want to make the final move?" he asked. "There's still time to walk it back." I looked at the framed photo on the shelf, Margaret on our wedding day, eyes fierce, full of grace. I remembered what she wrote me in a letter once. "Legacy isn't love. It's proof you stood for something." "I'm sure," I said. By afternoon, I sat down at my computer and drafted an email. Just one line. To Marissa Daniels. Subject: final transfer. "You made your table, now sit at it." I hovered over send for a few seconds, then I clicked. They thought legacy was something I'd forget to lock, but memory is sharper than they ever imagined. I opened the secure portal Harold set up, watched the assets shift in real time, accounts closed, names removed, trust balances renamed, property under the Daniels Foundation listed as public legacy property, not for resale. It was all there. My wife's old painting studio turned into a community arts center. My cabin in the woods, now a retreat for veterans dealing with PTSD. And the last one, the one Rick and Marissa thought they'd inherit, gone from their reach, permanently. By evening, I got the second voicemail. This time it was Marissa. Her voice trembled. "Dad, please call me. I don't understand what's happening. We need to talk. Emma's asking questions. Rick is losing it. You didn't have to go this far." She sounded like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, realizing the bridge was gone. I didn't respond. Instead, I lit the fireplace, sat in Margaret's old chair, let the flames crackle like applause for the silence I'd earned. There are endings that scream, and then there are the ones that freeze people where they stand. I held the transfer certificate in my hands one last time, gold seal embossed, finalized, ironclad. Harold had made sure of it. They'll never be able to touch a cent, not legally, not emotionally. The weight wasn't in the paper. It was in the freedom. Later that night, I stood in the hallway staring at Emma's photo taped to the fridge. A school play, her holding a paintbrush, still innocent, still watching. I whispered, "You'll understand someday." And in that silence, I realized they never really froze me out. They just gave me the time to lock every single door they'd ever hoped to walk through. When truth can't be told at the table, you hand it quietly into the right hands. The park was empty except for the crunch of dry leaves under my cane. Wind carried the smell of old pine and cold earth. I sat on our usual bench, the one under the twisted oak where Margaret used to read Emma fairy tales. That little girl wasn't little anymore. Emma approached with her hands stuffed in her jacket, hood pulled up, but I could still see her eyes, clear, heavy, older than 14 should allow. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, voice soft but steady. I smiled. "You came." "Mom's out shopping, said I could go sketch." She lifted her backpack. I lied. "You get that from your dad or your mother." She smiled faint. "You, maybe." That stung in the best way. We sat in silence for a while, watching a squirrel struggle to bury an acorn too big for its paws. I cleared my throat. "Emma, do you know what's happening?" She looked at her shoes. "Not all of it, but enough." I waited. She looked up. "They're angry and scared. I heard them fighting last night. Dad was yelling about money. Mom blamed you, but I know that's not the full story." I reached into my coat, pulled out the envelope. Thick, sealed, her name written in my handwriting, block letters, like I used to label her lunchbox. "I want you to have this," I said, handing it to her. "Inside is a key to a P.O. box. One day when you're ready, really ready, you'll open it, and you'll understand everything." She took it without hesitation, slid it into her bag like it was part of her. "Is it bad?" she asked. "No, it's just true." She blinked. "Is this why Mom doesn't talk about Grandma anymore?" That caught me off guard. "She doesn't." Emma shook her head. "It's like she erased her. There's not a single photo of her in the house now." I exhaled slowly. "Your grandmother would have liked you, Emma. You ask the right questions. You look people in the eye. She used to write me stories, remember?" "I do. I still have them," she whispered, "in a shoebox under my bed." We watched a father push his toddler on a swing. The little boy laughed like the world couldn't touch him. "I wish I could do more," Emma said suddenly. "I don't want you to be alone." I placed my hand over hers. "You're doing more than you know." She pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper, a sketch, me sitting on the bench, charcoal lines delicate but bold, honest. "You drew this now?" She nodded. "From memory, in case I don't get to see you as often." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You're not losing me. You're finding the part of me that matters most." She hugged me then, arms tight around my ribs, chin on my shoulder. "I already need it," she said. "Whatever in that box, I already need to know." Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we hand forward quietly when someone's finally ready to carry it. She pulled away, stood, zipped up her jacket. "I have to go before they notice." I nodded. "Don't open it early. Wait until you're strong enough to hold what's inside without dropping it." She paused. "I think I already am." She walked away, the envelope tucked under her arm like a shield. She didn't look back, didn't need to. The wind stirred the bench as I sat alone again. And for the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt understood. There's a difference between being seen and being recognized for who you truly are. The newspaper hit my porch like any other Sunday delivery, crisp, folded, indifferent. I wasn't expecting it until Tuesday. But there it was. Front page, local section. Widowed father funds legacy foundation after public disowning. I stared at the headline for a long time before I unfolded the paper. My coffee sat untouched, cooling beside me. There was a photo, my wife's name etched in bronze on the side of the Community Arts Center. Below it, 3 young scholarship recipients stood smiling, arms wrapped around each other, holding envelopes and easels. Their eyes carried the kind of hope I used to think belonged to the past. I read the article. Daniels, a retired Navy mechanic and lifelong resident, has quietly donated over $2 million in assets to fund a scholarship for children of veterans and a local art initiative in honor of his late wife, Margaret. The move comes after what neighbors describe as a very public falling out with his only daughter, Marissa. They didn't need to include the details, but the implication hung heavy like smoke. I folded the paper carefully. No gloating, no pride, just stillness. Later, I walked to the grocery store. I didn't plan it, didn't need anything, but something in my legs moved on their own, like they needed to touch the ground beneath me again. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside. Cold air met my skin, and the smell of overripe bananas greeted me like an old friend. I grabbed a cart, empty, and pushed through the aisles like a man browsing memory not produce. Then I heard it. "That's him," someone whispered behind the cereal shelves. A woman glanced up from her cart, eyes meeting mine. She gave a nod, simple, solemn. Her husband followed suit. 2 young clerks near the dairy section paused, their conversation dropping. I caught my name in the breeze between their voices. I didn't speak, but I stood a little taller. At the register, the young cashier scanned the pack of gum I didn't need. You're Mr. Daniels, right?" he asked. I looked up. "I am." He nodded, swallowed. "My uncle's a vet. He saw your plaque, said you did something real, said you did something nobody else had the guts to. I tapped my card on the reader. It wasn't about guts. Still, he said, thanks. I walked out into the cold, sun glinting off the ice patches on the sidewalk. For years, I was wallpaper in my own life. Now, the walls had names I could stand beside again. Back home, I placed the newspaper on the mantel, right beside the photo of Margaret. She stared back with that familiar smirk, one brow slightly raised, like she knew something I didn't. You always said they'd try to erase us, I whispered. Guess we left our own ink instead. The phone rang around 6 p.m. I didn't answer. The machine picked up. Marissa's voice came through. I saw the article, I guess. I guess I didn't know how much you were doing, or why you did it like this. I just wanted to say I saw it. She didn't leave a goodbye. I didn't need one. Instead, I opened the drawer beneath the mantel, pulled out the second copy of the article, slipped it into the folder labeled Emma Truth. Then I sat back in my chair, fire crackling, old bones warm. The world had finally remembered my name. But more importantly, so had I. Some doors don't need to be kicked in, just knocked on, gently, after enough silence has passed to soften pride. The envelope was cream-colored, hand-addressed, no stamp, slipped through the mail slot like it belonged here. I opened it slowly, careful not to tear the corners. Mr. Daniels, we noticed your absence this year. We hope you're well. If you ever feel like returning, your story is one we'd like to hear. Pastor Ruth. No judgment, no sermon, just a line of ink that made me set the letter down like it was heavier than it should be. That Sunday I shaved, pressed my slacks, wore the coat Margaret always called dignified. I drove the 5 blocks to St. Mary, parked where I always used to, third spot from the corner, under the crooked pine tree. I sat in the car for a minute longer than I needed to. Then I stepped out and walked toward the stone steps. Inside it smelled the same. Old wood polish, candle wax, faint perfume of memories. I hadn't crossed this threshold since Margaret's memorial, back when the pews were packed but no one knew how to speak to a man who had just buried his future. Back when Marissa had stood at the pulpit, reading eulogies like grocery lists. Back when I still thought family was something you could carry in your coat pocket. I walked down the side aisle, chose a pew in the back, sat. The wood creaked under my weight. My cane rested beside me. Pastor Ruth was mid-sermon. She caught my eye but didn't pause. That was grace. She spoke about second chances, about forgiveness not needing a reply, about grief being love with nowhere to go. I didn't blink much during the service, just listened. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, she approached me. Mr. Daniels, she said softly. Pastor, I nodded. You've been missed. I wasn't sure I was still on the roster. Her smile was kind but not pitying. No one gets erased unless they ask to be. I looked around at the empty pews. Sometimes people stop showing up before they even leave. She sat beside me, close but not too close, and sometimes they return when they're ready to be seen again. I took out the letter she'd sent, folded and worn now. This mattered. I hoped it would. We sat in silence. And it didn't hurt. Some people ask for redemption like a favor. Others just show up and earn it, quietly. In the foyer I noticed the new donation board. My name wasn't on it. Neither was Margaret's. That felt right. It wasn't about recognition. It was about showing up to something I hadn't realized I missed. A teenage usher held the door open for me on the way out. Sir, that coat looks sharp, he said. I chuckled. It's got a few miles on it. Still fits right. I nodded. Some things age into themselves. Back home, I made tea instead of coffee, sat by the window. Snow hadn't come yet, but the sky warned me it was close. I placed Pastor Ruth's letter beside the article. then reached into the drawer and took out Margaret's church pin, gold cross, blue enamel. I pinned it on the inside of my coat, not for anyone to see. Just for me. Doors don't stay closed forever. Sometimes they wait quietly for the right knock. Not every victory needs applause. Some just need a place to sit, and the weight finally gone from your chest. The bench was still there. Same old slats, worn smooth by weather and memory. The plaque, "In loving memory of Margaret Daniels," had faded, but I could still trace every letter with my finger. I sat down with a soft grunt, cane resting across my knees. The breeze danced lightly across the pond, sending ripples like whispered prayers across the surface. Across the playground, the swing creaked once empty, and I saw her. Emma, maybe 7 at the time, arms out, giggle echoing, "Push me higher, Grandpa." I blinked and it was gone. Just wind. Just the rustle of leaves above me. I pulled my coat tighter, reached into my pocket and pulled out the photo I always carried now, Emma, holding her scholarship certificate. The letter I'd written her was tucked into her future, not her present. She'd find it when the world pressed on her too hard. "Let them build tables," I murmured. "We build legacies." A woman passed by with a stroller. She glanced over, nodded. "Beautiful morning." I nodded back. They usually are when you survive the night. She smiled gently and walked on. 2 birds landed near my shoes, squabbling over a crust of bread someone had left behind. The louder one lost. Typical. I looked out over the water, let silence sit beside me like an old friend. I didn't feel proud, not exactly. I didn't feel spiteful either. I felt done. Finished in the way a song ends, not because it ran out of sound, but because it said what it came to say. The world doesn't hand you closure, you write it, one decision at a time, one truth at a time. My phone buzzed. A message from Harold. Emma's P.O. box was accessed today. I smiled. Didn't reply. Didn't need to. The bench groaned as I shifted, leaned back. In the distance, the church bells rang once, noon. I thought of Marissa. I imagined her walking past the chair at the end of her table, the one she never gave me, the one that would always be empty now, not from punishment, but from principle. She'd wonder if I ever forgave her. She'd wonder what I left behind. But I didn't owe her peace. I owed myself peace. Sometimes the only justice that matters is silence where there was once screaming. A boy ran past, chasing a dog with a stick in its mouth. His laughter filled the air. I closed my eyes. I didn't need to see any more. I'd already seen it all. The betrayal. The unraveling. The rebuilding. The choice to walk away instead of burn it down. Behind my eyelids I saw Margaret, not as she was when she died, but as she was the day we bought this bench, laughing, calling me ridiculous for insisting the plaque say legacy. "You're not dying," she had said. "No," I'd replied, "but one day I will, and I wanted to say I left something behind." She kissed me then, and now she was gone. But the legacy was. An empty chair at someone else's table means nothing when the one at your own is already filled, with memory, with truth, with quiet dignity. I stood up slowly, brushed the seat with my palm, let the wind carry the rest, and walked home,